We're going to take a look at May, the market data locally here in Rochester from May this past month. Before we dive into it, I think it's important to kind of take a look at some of the national headlines because a lot of, I think how to use this data is going to, come back to a comparison to what's happening nationally and how to have that conversation with your people and just how to inform and educate and objection handle as well. So here's one headline. This was from last week. U.S. inventory exceeds 1 million homes for the first time in 6 years. If you dive into this further, you will see active listings, new listings here. This is nationally, but up 31% active listings are from May of 2024. New listings up 7.2% from May of 2024. Interestingly enough, they show, what it is from pre-COVID, I guess as a benchmark in history, so to speak. And still not there in terms of that same level of inventory. But again, this headline grab of okay, we've got 1 million homes on the market for the first time since 2019. This inventory levels rebounding. Another headline type thing I want to mention nationally is, we're still dropping in terms of the total number of homes that are selling. Slowest pace for existing home sales since 2009 was a recent headline. What does this mean? Fewer people are buying, inventory is building, and homes are sitting longer. So it's not a crash, but it's a clear sign of the market shifting. I wanted to show some Gary Keller slides here to bring some more perspective to this conversation. Here you've got the inventory levels, so you can see the difference of this being I believe this would be month supply of inventory. Yes. So they're called balance around 6 months supply of inventory, which is this dotted line here. You can see how drastic the shortage has been in recent years, right? And especially coming off COVID 21, 22, and you can kind of see we're climbing, but we're still not balanced, even nationally. Although, there's going to be plenty of uh, suggestions to make it feel like we're on like this end of the extreme here, where I'm pointing at this, extreme buyer's market conditions, right? So just understand the rhetoric, and similar to Jody bringing up, just the wordsmithing that can be done with how you're talking with people. The same thing kind of happens when you're looking at data and not necessarily manipulating it, but you could choose to do that. Here's another graph showing just the difference in inventory per month nationally. You can see kind of the rebound that that the country is having this year compared to last year, and ultimately leading to higher days on market so far this year. There's one more thing I wanted to show. Here's the home sales level. So, again, the prediction for 2025 is that we do rebound off this bottom of the barrel 4.1 million home nationally sold level, but so far those headlines aren't we've got work to do. We've got to have a busy summer across the country in order to really see a rebound with this type of, even though it's a small amount of growth, but to just not have this thing bottom out again at 4 million and low change numbers of total homes sold. And you can kind of see that here in terms of the monthly levels, right? Like January had a little bit of a rebound, but February was down, March was down. So this is, doesn't have April or May yet, but yeah. So Local
These
data,
numbers are nationally, right?
all national numbers so far.
Okay.
So I wanted to start with the national picture so you have the, comparatively speaking to our market. So drum roll for our market. Boom. Here's single family Monroe County data. Okay. So really, guys, like it's the more things change, the more they stay the same. Will be a kind of a somewhat of a conclusion from this discussion, but a lot of similarities to last month. We've got almost a 10% jump in pricing from May of 2024. We're at 290 right now, median sales price in the county. Up 5% from last month. So not, extreme like those double digit type of increases, but still increasing. Um, Closed sales, really big pickup, almost 30% from last month. However, not at the same level, almost at the same level as last year. So again, that national, how many homes are going to sell number, this is indicative that like we're not, totally out of the bottom of the barrel type of numbers here. Now, again, keep in mind this closed data will increase as the days of the month go on here as people close out their listings and so on and so forth. So this will increase probably to a level where this -1% number may be, right at zero or a small amount of growth. But overall, like we've had a big jump since April. However, from May of 2024, year over year, we haven't grown. And if we do end up growing, it'll be very little. But right now, kind of just call it even in terms of the total number of homes selling, comparatively speaking. Still 7 days on the market. Still 122% list to sales price ratio, which was up almost 2% from last month. I believe it was at 120. Yeah, 120%. So still things selling well over asking price. We've got, interestingly enough, a small decline from the same time as last year. So just call that, the same, comparatively speaking. So it's not like the market has gotten more more extreme or more competitive from the same time as last year. Also, worth noting here, keep in mind, like this is what you'll see if you see this dip here, right? You're always going to see an up and down roller coaster effect, you know, each year to account for seasonality in our markets. The median sales price is going to be higher in the spring and summer months than it will be in the fall and winter months. List to sales price ratio will be higher, at least in these market conditions in the spring and summer months compared to the fall and winter. So just keep that in mind. Medium price per square foot, really same as price overall. Here's where it gets interesting. The inventory numbers here, these bottom three categories. We've got a jump from last month, which is good for our seasonality progressing, April to May. However, from the same time as last year, we've got relatively healthy decreases in inventory compared to the same time as last year. So there are less homes going on the market this year than last year, which is a direct contradiction to what you're going to hear nationally. This is why the data matters, right? We've got a decrease as well in month supply of inventory from last month and last year. I mean, just from one back down to 0.9, but we're not going in this direction of, uh, healthy increases in inventory to balance the market. And also the demand side is still cooperating is a way I like to think of it, in the sense that there's still enough demand to, lead to a seller's market condition. As seen here by, a decrease year over year in the total number of homes that are left standing compared to, what was listed. So all in all, still the same extreme sellers market. I want to show you one more thing here on this infographic. This is a comparison of just year to date numbers. Again, Monroe County single family. Just to show year to date through May of 2025 this year compared to year to date through May of 2024. Same time, we've got pricing up almost 10%, and we've got closed sales down nearly 4%. So again, that like bottom of the barrel type of number for total number of transactions happening. Um, this data indicates we're not out of it, interestingly enough. What do I want to make here? So yeah, that's the data. I think the discussion is going to go towards, all right, well, what do we feel? What are we hearing? What's happening out there? Is there more opportunity on an individual, basis from a feeling or like tangible outcome standpoint of I got an offer accepted with no competition and at asking price with an inspection compared to, years in the past or months, previously? Or is this data accurate? That's the discussion. The more important discussion than that too is ultimately what do you do to have conversations with your people around this data, whether it's somebody in your pipeline or just overall lead generation. But um here's the facts of the market right now, right? Here's this is the current state of the market from the data standpoint. I'm willing to bet there's a lot of people on this call right now that have a different feeling compared to what this data suggests. So again, this data is showing you extreme sellers market still. We have, the supply is not increasing year over year. And we still have extreme conditions with low days on market, low month supply of inventory, high list to sales price ratio, and increasing prices.
Jason, I think there's what I've seen and how I kind of explain it to my people is like it's the perfect storm. There's a Titanic ship floating around. We're trying to turn and maneuver, not hit this iceberg. And there's pockets of, you know, houses that are still selling for 20, 30, 40% over. And then there's pockets where the anomaly hits and it sells for listing. I mean, just last week I had two offers accepted, one in Fairport listed at 250. The house got two offers, the townhouse got two offers, one of them backed out. We won at list price. And my buyer was like, I'm never going to win. I'm not going to write. What's the point in writing? I've been beat out multiple times. I said, let's just write. You never know. She wrote, she won. Offer number two, house out in Chilai, listed. They wanted 350, listed at 320. We wrote for 320 up to 340. And they were like, she came back and said, we don't have any other offers. Would your people do it at 350? My people said, no, we'll do it at 320. They accepted. So it's happening. And there's, I think the great houses are still selling, and the houses that need some kind of love are now open up to that negotiation. They're trying to play the market. They're playing high. They're seeing escalations that go up to what they want. They reach out and say, hey, my seller really wants 350. I saw that you wrote the escalation for 350. Would you do 350? And now it's the buyer's decision to, do they really care that much? What's their motivation? And if they're super motivated and frustrated, they give them the 350. And if they're like, I'm willing to gamble and I'll keep looking unless I get it at list price. But I see the turn changing ever so slightly in some pockets in some areas.
Yeah, I mean, listen, like what I'll say is I agree with everything you just said in terms of a pulse of the market, right? And that it feels like there's more opportunity. We have, you know, beyond feeling of just stories like this, right? And if you know, there's just more and more, you know, conversations that I'm having in the last couple weeks indicate that, I mean, frankly, indicate that this data wouldn't be what we're looking at. So now we're in this balance of like, okay, do we trust our feeling or do we trust this data? And I don't necessarily think it needs to be one or the other. I think you have to use this data to be able to, you know, educate and inform people and consult with people at a high level so that they know, you know, generally speaking, this is what you're getting into. But good news, you're hiring me as a pro, and I've got the real time leading indicator type of pulse. Whereas this lagging data, you know, doesn't necessarily take into account this week, what's happening out there, or this listing specifically, and being able to identify there's really hasn't been a lot of activity. We parked out at the open house for an hour and a half out of 2 hours, and there was only a couple people that came through versus, you know, it being a zoo. So, you know, knowing how to operate and then, you know, advise and make recommendations to clients based on all things considered, right? Tangible data and intangible, you know, pulse of the market type of feel becomes somewhat of a delicate balance, I guess. But, you know, at the end of the day, it's, you know, when you have everything, you're better equipped for, you know, the convincing conversations when needed, the objection handling when needed, the consulting at a level that positions, you know, your buyer or seller for success in this market. And then from there, if you need to pivot in a good or a bad way, yeah, that's your job too, to make sure that you're pushing that type of you know, that type of strategy to play out versus just continuing to roll with something that becomes dated if there are changes in the market and you don't change, because that can go good or bad, right? In the sense of like it could just work out, or it could work out to where you really didn't represent your buyer because there wasn't competition and you just went in 100 grand over asking price against blazing when you didn't need to. And yeah, that seller's pretty happy. Buyer's happy that they got a home, but what could have been type of thing is out there. I'll stop rambling. I'll have some time for questions and thoughts and anything else anybody wants to share. Here's the data. What do you do with it?
I think what's cool, man, is the agents that are on here regularly, you know, are that are in it all day long. They know that this isn't anything to fear. It's tons and tons of opportunity. It really is. I mean, especially the ones that like Pecora was saying, you know, the ones that have been out there for a long time, the ones that I can't get a house, I can't get a house, can't get a house. So I think we all need to look at it as amazing opportunity for us, especially this year. It's awesome.
Yeah, I mean, everything, like you use this data at a macro level, so to speak, right? To just have an understanding of what the market's doing. And then from there, everything is an individual, situational, per person, per listing, per consultation type of approach, right? Because a, you know, buyer looking in, I don't know, Scottsville, right? Different than a buyer looking in Fairport. And as much as we can just lump in both of those to Monroe County data, it does differ. Now, you got to be aware of the buyer that's taking in the national headlines and either wants to disagree with this data as an overall market like synopsis or doesn't understand it. You still have to be aware of that, even though there's plenty of opportunities to, you know, push something through, it feels like now, right? Versus, in the past couple of years where it's been, um it's been tough to find those wins, right? So there's a lot of balance that needs to play out in terms of, optimism and pessimism and just, how to, have the proper strategy with a buyer or a seller in order to be successful in the market.
Hey, I got a
I think
question for you or whoever, if you don't mind. So one of the things I've been struggling with a little bit is it's easy to have a conversation with buyers in the market we've had for the last few years. And if it switches over completely, that's an easy conversation. How do you approach when you're in the middle of the change? Like that's what I've struggled with a little bit is like I have a listing tomorrow and it's not like it's one way or the other. You're kind of maneuvering it's kind of a middle ground, right? Like, and I just don't know how to have that conversation sometimes with clients when it's actually shifting, not shifted, if that makes sense.
I think that the way I'm thinking of this is to not get stuck in the middle.
Okay.
Right? In terms of an individual strategy, to where like for a listing, for example, it's here's what's going on. We may be in the midst of change or we may be shifting. We haven't shifted yet. You know, that's going to help inform the strategy, but it's not necessarily going to decide what the strategy is in total because now you got to bring in the human element in play of like, what's the best thing for them to do? Because even in this extreme sellers market that we've been in, not everybody has the personality or, the property for, let's price it low and have a bidding war that plays out. Like that
So
may personality wise, that may drive people to an anxiety attack or whatever you want to call it, right? Or logistically, like, they just can't accommodate the number of showings that are needed to pull that off, right? Or maybe the property is, on a main road with a roof that's ready to cave in, and we're not going to have that same level of demand. So it's really like all things considered, here's the data, here's the pulse, which may contradict it in some ways. Relative to your home, here's what I would do if I were you. I think, really getting to that position with every buyer or seller to be prepared to answer that question, because frankly, you have to be prepared to answer that question in the profession you're in, because why wouldn't people put you on the spot? Like, hey, you're the professional, you're a human, you know me. What would you do if you were me? Right. And just being in this position where, like, look at data aside, this is the strategy that we should be, strongly considering for listing your home. And if that doesn't suit you, then okay, here would be my plan B, but at the risk of XYZ.
got it.
So it's just
you could also
everything's an
give a
individual situational type of play.
you could also give them a few if this then that scenarios. Just because you don't have a crystal ball, you don't know the future. You could say, well, if we do it this way, and that doesn't work, then this, and then there's this, if this then that, and do a couple 2 3, not to be overwhelming, but a couple 2 or 3. And then the other piece of advice that I could give you is, do you know any other agents like in Florida or in another state that has already been through the shift? Because maybe talking to them is about some of their strategies of what they've said to sellers through the change might be helpful as well.
No, I appreciate everything. We ended up just real quick, maybe to play out for you guys. We ended up talking and actually doing what you guys suggested, and we decided to raise the list price just a little bit because if worst case happens, they can live with that. And I appreciate all the advice because it's cool listening to you guys in the morning. I really enjoy it and appreciate it.
Are you still going to do delayed negotiations though?
Yeah, we are. We just
Okay.
the 50 under and bidding war, we went up just a little, not crazy, but a little, so that they can say, well, if worst case happens, we're okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
Good idea.
Well, and that's all that matters, right? Is like we got to a position where we know the positive outcomes. We have an idea of what the negative outcome is. We're hedging that. We've got a strategy in place that we're all on board with. Great.
Cool.
Happy Monday, y'all. Go get it.